special panel discussion on Adrienne Kennedy and her incredible influence in the world of theater, playwriting, and the canon of African American literature as a whole. My name is Sarah Branch, and I'm the Marketing and Humanities Fellow here at Theater for a New Audience. I'd also like to take a minute to say hello to everybody tuning in to our Facebook live stream, which is very exciting. And so before we get started, I want to take a minute to talk about our Viewfinder 360 for He Brought Her Heart Back in a Box. This is an online magazine that we publish for each production that we do and features different articles and interviews surrounding the context of the production. This issue is especially exciting. It features an interview by award-winning playwright Brandon Jacob Jenkins, who interviewed Adrienne Kennedy on the show. And so now would be a great time for everybody to silence their cell phones if they haven't yet. And I would like to introduce our wonderful panelists, starting with our amazing moderator for this evening, Margo Jefferson. Margo Jefferson is a Pulitzer Prize-winning critic and author of On Michael Jackson. She's also author of Negroland, which was the winner of the 2015 National Book Critics Circle Award for autobiography. She's a former book, theater, and culture critic for the New York Times and Newsweek, and currently teaches in the School of the Arts Writing Program at Columbia University. Welcome, Margo. This guest speaker is Charlotte Brathwaite. She was named as one of the up-and-coming women in theater to watch by Playbill. Her work has been seen in the Americas, Europe, the Caribbean, and Asia, and she received numerous awards, including the Prelude Festival Frankie Award and the Princess Gracie Award. Charlotte currently is Assistant Professor of Theater Arts at MIT. Welcome, Charlotte. Our next guest is Lydia Diamond. Lydia is an award-winning playwright. Some of her plays include Stick Fly, Smart People, and The Bluest Eye. Her work has been commissioned by theaters across the country, including Steppenwolf Theater, McCarter Theater, and the Roundabout Theater Company. Lydia is currently faculty at University of Illinois Chicago, where she teaches playwriting. Welcome, Lydia. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to welcome Jackie Sibblies-Drury. Jackie is a Brooklyn-based playwright. Her plays include, and I'm really excited to say this title, we are proud to present a presentation about the Herero of Namibia, formerly known as Southwest Africa, from the German Sudwestafrika between the years 1884 to 1915. Social creatures and really. Jackie is a United States Artist Gracie Fellow and a New York Theater Workshop Usual Suspect. Her next play, Fairview, will premiere at Soho Rep this May. Thank you all so much.
Well, hello. First of all, just greetings probably from all of us, and thanks to everyone who marched today. Some playwright, and I'm forgetting who, talked about the fact that we must have a radical politics of the ballot box and of the spirit. And that both of those, that sense of history and of the spirit as radical, that's Adrienne Kennedy. It's all through this play, isn't it? In that strange, haunting way. She also once said, that her plays were states of mind. And, I think we're probably all still haunted by that. You see here, those states of mind are states of history, and nations and peoples have psyches. And so the individual psyche keeps merging and being murdered and assaulted by the social and the historical psyche. But, so here are these three radical artists of history and the spirit. So I just want to start with, what does Adrienne Kennedy, whose first play opened in 1964, where does she get you? How does she matter to you? What sets you off as a as an artist, and as an artist, as a woman, as a Black, as all of the above when you see and read her work. Whoever would like to begin? No, I wasn't, if I looked at you, it was
Because you were next to me.
That's it. Whoever would like to start. You directed her. Yeah. So maybe.
I can start, sure. Yeah, so, you know, I think one of the things that struck me the most when I discovered Adrienne Kennedy, or when she was brought to me, is that she really, in a way, writes these worlds that are like layered with sound and visuals and music, and all of that is like in a time warp, so to speak, right? A lot of the work that I'm interested in deals with like how time fluctuates and how, you know, especially, you know, dealing as a Black woman living in this world, like time kind of feels like it's always shifting around us. Like we were out marching today and it's like we're asking for the same things that we're asking for 50 years ago, right? So time as it moves forward is still always coming back and forth and in a way haunting us, and at the same time propelling us forward, propelling us into new directions, and I really feel a really strong pull in her work for that, you know. So that, and I also would say, as a person who directs experimental works or works that have been called experimental or avant-garde, I mean, she is an incredible avant-garde writer. And I often feel, sitting in this body, that I'm often not allowed to be avant-garde, like I don't have the right to, you know, think outside of boxes and think beyond, you know, confines of language or movement, and for me it's always, you know, the experiments I do on stage are exactly that, they're experiments. I'm always looking for how people interact and how that shifts and changes, and I feel like she does that in her work in a really mysterious, haunting kind of way. Like I'm still digesting this, I'm like shaken a little bit from it, and thank you Evan and the whole crew who worked on it. It was a really beautiful and haunting production.
Yes.
Okay. I can't wait to hear more about directing Adrienne Kennedy. But I will say, I think, I got this email, can you come sit on this panel? And I thought, why was I asked to come sit on the panel? And then actually, when I read the invitation the second time, in it was reference to an interview I did a long time ago when I had a play going on in DC. And one of the things that I was saying, so I'm older than Google, as many of us are. And when I was in high school and then in college, I wasn't introduced to so many African American writers in the canon at all. The canon was pretty much dead white men, and so I didn't come to her when I should have at all. And the Google thing is because you couldn't just Google need a monologue for an African American woman with a certain amount of neuroses and self-exploration. So I had written a play. I'd written many plays, and I wrote a play called Voyeur de Venus about Saartjie Baartman. And in that play, there were some images that I had. There were these wild, disturbing dreams that were put on stage by, and I'm not going to go into the play, but it's about the Saartjie Baartman, derogatorily referred to as the Hottentot Venus. And in it is a contemporary, it goes back and forth from a contemporary story of an African American social anthropologist who's been hired to write about Saartjie Baartman, and then the historical story of Saartjie Baartman. They kind of go back and forth, but the turmoil of this modern woman thinking about what does it mean to put this on stage, and is that actually just submitting Saartjie Baartman to what she was already made to go through, and all of these issues of identity and politics and race and gender and class and sexuality. And it was after then that I was introduced to Adrienne Kennedy, and I read Funny House of the Negro, and I was startled because so many of the images were almost identical to her images. And it struck me as somewhat, well, first of all, it was very flattering. It made me feel like maybe I'm an artist. But it was also disturbing because it meant that the things that Adrienne Kennedy was the things that she was responding to then, the things that were in the zeitgeist then were hitting me in similar places, in similar ways, all of these years later, and it's disturbing. And so that's how I came to her, and I think that's why I'm here today.
It strikes me that it's like the two characters. Down is theirs, and then down, and then back into history. And yeah, the never-changing zeitgeist. Jackie?
Oh yeah, that was one of the most striking and beautiful images of the play. Or that I'm going to think about that backwards staircase climb for a long time. Sorry, I have to speak quietly because I realize the microphone is really loud.
Really live.
But I guess I have no, it's good. It makes me, I'm already nervous, and so it's good to have like weird other noises that aren't being produced by my nervousness. But I think I have a similar origin story to these two women of learning about theater, or we all learn about theater in elementary school by doing school plays, or and the school plays we do are often written by people who are deceased and white and male. I think that I didn't realize that Black people wrote plays until I got into college. And I didn't realize that Black people wrote experimental plays until I read Susan Lori Parks and Adrienne Kennedy when I was in grad school, which I should be more ashamed of. Even though there's something where as a young nothing but trying to be a theater artist, I think that I thought that African American theater was rooted in psychological realism, and that you had to have characters that were living in a specific situation, characters where the character is the first and only consideration, character and plot, and that they move linearly through time. And I didn't, I thought that those stories were beautiful, and I thought that they were told in a way that I could relate to, but I couldn't relate to the form of them. That just wasn't the way that I experienced story, I guess. And so I was sort of like, well, I guess I'm the weirdo. And then I was like, no, there's a whole history of weirdos. There's a whole canon of weirdos. Because there's something, especially, or now I'm getting nervous again because I'm blabbering. But there's something about, she writes about Black female trauma in such a specific way, in such a clear way. And that's something that, as people do so much research in trauma and thinking about it, there's no way to experience that linearly. And so I feel like I read Funny House of a Negro and my brain exploded. It's still, and the play's brain is exploded too. And so she's just awesome. She's awesome.
Another thing I'm curious about with all of you.
She has a wonderful memoir. It's kind of like a notebook diary portrait of the artist as a young, colored to Negro to African American woman. But it's this chronicle, among other things, of everything that ever influenced her, from old maid cards, because you could create magic with cards, even though they were old maids, bless their hearts, to songs, Nat King Cole, say, or her father singing to her, to Tennessee Williams, whom she adored, to Lorca, whom she adored, to Charlotte Bronte, whom she adored. But the fearlessness of her range. There was nothing that this little girl in England, this little brown girl, could not imaginatively get into. That I always found incredibly emboldening for me. Did that affect you all too?
Absolutely.
In terms of just what you can do with knowledge in your work.
Certainly, and I'm sort of jealous of both of you that you had had an opportunity to sort of develop your voices in conversation with that you did have that head explosion, and that impacted you, if not in terms of shaping your voice, at least affirming it in a really beautiful way. And that's exciting to me, and it gives me hope. It makes me think that generationally, at least artistically, there's progress. I always talk about how I never get to sit on panels and talk about the making of the art. And so I'm excited to hear more about the way, what did you say, weird? You didn't say weird. Did you say weird? Yeah, I'm really interested to hear how those beautiful things come out of these weird minds and that were affirmed by this work that was done before, because we never get to talk about making art. We always talk about being Black people in relationship to white people and how we can't make art. So this is a very exciting moment for me, and it seems right that it would be on a stage on which an Adrienne Kennedy play happened. And so that's very exciting and moving. And the people upstairs, holy Jesus, so beautiful.
Well, speaking of making art, how do you direct an Adrienne Kennedy play? Yours was She Talks to Beethoven, right? Yeah, one of the Alexander.
Well, I'm gonna maybe answer a little bit of your previous question, because I come from a dance background. I don't actually come from a theater background. And when I got to New York, I started working at La Mama Theater, which is another incredible Black woman who is all about the avant-garde and reaching outside of boxes. And 2 weeks after, global, totally. 2 weeks after I graduated high school, I was on a bus with a company of 30 people with 20 different passports in Eastern Europe, and there was a war going on, and we were performing in different places while this war was going on, and I was 16, and I never knew what Serbia was, or what Croatia was, or where this place was, but Ellen took me there, and I think that when I worked on She Talks to Beethoven, it was interesting because Adrienne, I had a few conversations with her, and she was very generous with her time to speak with me, and I found out that one of her, I feel like a couple of her early pieces were actually done at La Mama, which was really moving to me because Ellen always encouraged us to not be limited by, first of all, the way you look or what you have access to. You can always get more. You can always find more, right? If you focus on the people and the things. And so, I have a very short attention span on some level. Like, I love theater, but when I'm reading plays, I listen to different music, I read different books while I'm reading plays, I have things on, I feel like I need to take things in from a lot of different places in order to kind of feel, not just, hear the words of the playwright, but actually to feel them. And I feel like, with She Talks to Beethoven, for example, I found a lot of similarities, or a lot of connection to that play, because I had just spent almost 8 years living in Europe, 2 of which were in Germany, kind of getting obsessed with German theater and their ability to kind of, give permission to rip apart the classics and let them be strange and weird, right? So I came here with this weird idea of all this crazy stuff I was gonna do, and then found out that there are these boxes that exist. So you look like that, so you should make this kind of work. Or why does your work remind me of that other person who looks like you's kind of work? And I was like, well, I don't know, but I come from a dance background, so the body is very important to me. Adrienne's work, I feel like the body is really important. Actually, yes, that was a beautiful moment with the backwards walking down the steps, but also the first kiss was I just had to hold my breath, and I feel like her work lends you to these spaces where the body is just kind of taken, She Talks to Beethoven, as I was saying, is 1960s Ghana, a woman in Ghana with her husband. He mysteriously disappears, kind of like Patrice Lumumba, and at the same time this woman is thinking about and writing letters to Beethoven, and the place switches with no notice, and you're in 1805 Austria, and Beethoven is locked in his room trying to write the last pages of Fidelio, his one opera that he wrote, which is about a woman saving her husband from who was a political prisoner, right? So super all these levels of connection and terms of the politics, in terms of being in different bodies, being in different spaces, like Black women in conversation with Europe, and what does that mean? And I myself was like trying to figure that all out. Like, where do I belong in this time-space continuum, you know? And I feel like the particular production we did, I collaborated very closely with a visual artist, Abigail DeVille, who built us this set, which was more about a feeling than it was about like a place, right? So that we could switch on and off and be wherever we needed to be. We could be in Ghana or we could be in Austria, you know? And the audience was asked to walk around the space the whole time, and the actors were in and out of them, and I just felt like her language, her words, and her just incredible sense of like, yes, these two places are talking to each other, not with like a period at the end, but with like a dot, 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 like everything is possible. And I feel like that connected to the visual artist I was working with the composer I worked with, who mixed all this Beethoven music with like kind of contemporary sounds. And I mean, yeah, I just feel like her words speak volumes to feeling. And you know, James Baldwin has a quote, which I'm gonna botch a little bit, but you'll get the idea. It's basically like only the artist can teach you how to love, can teach you what it means to hate, or to care for someone, or to raise a child. And I really feel like in so many ways her work does open those doors for me. So I'm very happy to get to see another production. There should be more productions.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So it's always struck me with Adrienne's work that it's so much about, the first time I read a play at first, I just feel stupid. And I'm trying so hard to understand it intellectually and feeling so like I have so much homework to do intellectually to begin to wrap my mind around it. And then when I read it again, and I just live in the emotion of it, I'm so struck by how that seems like the thing that we're all trying to do as artists, is live. And to what degree do you live in concert with the text and or fear of the text and or obligation to the text? How does that relationship work when you're directing the work?
Well, I don't know, I feel like a text is like a person, like there's like a lot of layers in there. You know, what is that Shrek quote? There's a lot of layers, right? Like, yeah. And so
I love that you had a Shrek reference.
Just had a lot of family time, so we watched a lot of like cartoons. Yeah, but I feel like it's like a person, and so I have to get to know it. You know, that's the main thing. So how do, we gotta hang out, we gotta spend a lot of time together, we gotta listen to music together, I have to like maybe move around the room with you a little bit, like I do. It's like crazy how I read a play. So yeah, I have to kind of just go into that space with the play and kind of pick it apart and do a lot of Googling or a lot of research and reading a lot of other things on the side, just to kind of help me to feel perhaps even like a moment of what the playwright is living with, right? I don't write plays, so to speak, sitting alone writing plays. I don't know how to do that. I congratulate you all, you're such amazing writers. Like I don't have the ability to do that. But what I do find for myself as a director is that I'm incredibly interested in people and their stories, and especially stories that I haven't heard before. So I'm always, that for me, that curiosity just leads me wherever it leads me. Yeah.
What's free space for you? What are you in concert with? What are you fighting against? What do you try to uncensor? Everybody's got different censorship.
It is my turn, sorry.
No, the idea of I feel like that's really to your first question too about like what kinds of things is one allowed to write about, and like what self-censorship and
That you allow yourself, but you allow yourself to write.
yeah, it's like I don't know. I'm in the midst of rewriting right now, so I'm a little bit afraid if I talk about it too much, it's going to like fall apart. But there's definitely. I think that when I'm writing, I'm thinking a lot about the who I'm going to be collaborating with as a director and designers, and also like what space the play might be happening in, and what the audience of the play is going to be bringing with them into the room. Even though that's something that you can't really, I mean, you don't get to know what's going on in every single person's mind. You don't even get to know what's going on in the mind of people that you're very close to, let alone strangers. And so, but like thinking about current politics and just the way that we're processing the world around us in a vague way. And so I feel like when I'm writing, I'm trying to create an experience in a room that pushes and pulls people sort of along a series of thoughts to have an emotional reaction to them. And hopefully there's also like a story that happens. But mostly it's like trying to like be like a crazily like psychopathic, manipulative person who is like trying to dictate the kinds of conversations people will have after the play is over. It's just like a really controlling, like terrible. But that is what I think I've been thinking about, especially right now. Like trying to figure out what people are going to talk about once they're able to talk again, after I get to talk for a long time.
I sort of love that you can embrace that, because I feel as though sometimes I have said that my work is in conversation with an audience, and that I am fully aware of what the demographic of my audience might be, and I have found it's a little bit different in New York, but not always, because I go to your theaters and sometimes, and so the more I've been produced in theaters that involve more production values and more money and higher paying tickets, the more my audiences are relatively homogenous and tend to be older white people. And I'm thinking I'm writing all of these, I'm writing these plays that are supposed to poke and prod at us to have this conversation in this dialect. And so what am I doing? You know, and to whom am I speaking? And so I find it would be impossible for me not to understand that dynamic, and I'm not letting it dictate what I'm doing, but kind of like you're saying, I'm trying to let it be my bitch, right? And see, that didn't go in this way. You never know who your audience is, but exactly,
It worked for me.
thank you. And then I'm like, Eva Orlando sitting over here going, that's exactly what I say, my kids don't too. But anyway, so it's exciting to me to hear you talk about how that relationship works, and to acknowledge that there is a relationship when you're putting on plays that are about race and the pain of that, I'll stop. But
No, I'm going to stop.
Okay. You know, we talk a lot about race. What about, where does the woman, where does it diverge from, you know, certain racial expectations, which historically have been largely male? Where does it diverge from non-black or non-people of color, women, you know, from, say, white women, expectations, histories? You know, because Adrienne is ahead of the curve in that way too. Yeah, I mean, she wrote a play about little girls, schoolgirls bleeding while reciting Latin, for God's sake. You know, yeah. And there were rapes in her plays.
Yeah.
Child abuse.
Super traumatic, like incredibly traumatic, and also dark. Like the the way that she talks about like things that she desires and that she like in different characters in her plays covet all the things that women and Black women aren't supposed to covet.
Covet is a great word, yes.
Thank
You
you.
do, yes. That's it, yeah.
And there was something that was this is not answering the question, but I feel like just as you're sitting in the same spot that the amazing performer was sitting in for much of the second half of the play.
Name, what was
Juliana
Canfield. Yes.
Juliana Canfield.
Yes.
She was so beautiful, and as a performer, I mean, she's beautiful too. But like as a figure, there was something that was so striking to me about this play that she didn't have a ton of text. There wasn't a lot for her to say. She was spending a lot of time observing this male character, and I thought that was such an interesting. Where I feel like I'm like I want to ask Adrienne some questions, but just about like how she came to write this play again after so much time, and if she felt as though because so many of her plays have these amazing like monologues. I mean, this play does too, but there was something that she felt like such an observer of the events that were happening in the play, and a sort of narrator. That I was also. Oh, this is why I don't start talking before I have the full idea. But there was something where it was also like the loudest moment at the beginning of the play was that whisper and like the whispers of gossip. She was such a difficult character and such a beautiful sort of bodiless presence in a way.
So utterly enshrouded.
Yeah.
You imagine the stories of her mama,
Yeah.
grandmother.
Right.
I mean, he was too, but
Yeah.
she was shrouded. He
Yes.
wasn't.
And so outside of the rules that I feel, doesn't it seem that if you were to write a play or create a piece in which there was a woman who spent that much of the play silent, and you were working with the dramaturg would say, why is the woman silent? And are we silencing the woman? And there's something so freeing, again, about, well, but that's not how I felt it. I thought there was so much that was said in that silence, and there was so much activeness in that observation, and such something that I've actually not seen an African American woman be able to do on stage in a way. And so that's really striking to me again around this person who's been making these plays for so long and continues to empower us to do things that whether we're constricted from doing because of a modern idea of what we're supposed to be doing to be progressive, or what we're restricted from doing because we're trying so hard to push against that. It's really interesting.
But your question was more to do with thinking about ourselves as women first.
Not necessarily first. I just wanted to bring that still
Well,
into. But that's what you're talking about.
That's what we
Exactly.
And again, like back to this thing about what panels are, it's the other thing that I often say about what I don't get to do in panels is be a woman. So I don't get to be an artist on a panel, and I don't get to be a woman because I'm always being a Black person on a panel. And of course, Adrienne would be the person that would empower us to be able to have this conversation.
Person.
Person's becoming about as weak a word as diversity. Right? Just, yeah. Too polite, covering too much, too superficially, yeah.
So what we're talking a little about it's the going down, what's still puzzling you about this play? Because I love that you said when you read her, and I'm always struggling with this as a critic. Oh, I don't quite get that.
What's going on?
And you used a phrase, and I can't quite remember it, but it's, the levels are just switching and there's no exposition, you know, kind of explaining to you, oh, this is how we get to Beethoven and then back to Donna. And it kept happening here too. You know, here's Germany, you know, but no character is going to literally say, yes, Hitler, you know, was studying, he had ministers studying segregation and studying how Native Americans were put on reservations. There it is, you know, Roosevelt and the day of infamy. You know, no character is going to say, well, the infamies that are committed against black people, you know, that's what he should have been saying. It's all there and churning up and churning around. But, you know, and then there's the speech, you know, the sort of Shakespearean speech. Your head kind of explodes, yeah. And I keep being afraid, what am I missing? Even as I'm entranced.
Well, just also connected to the last question you asked, I feel like the Black woman's body has been a site for, you know, throughout history, and especially the history of this country, where things have, you know, people have been fighting over, right? It has been a site, you know, rape has been used as a tool for power, right? And even now, in the time that we are with all the kind of revelations with sexual assault happening in this profession and in Hollywood and in so many different fields, I feel like, yes, Adrienne doesn't do the exposition, which is great, because what it does is it brings those issues back to the body, those fights for power, back onto the woman's body and in the psyche, right? I don't disconnect the two. I feel like your body tells a lot about what you're thinking and feeling, right? And just, you know, I have to say the idea of the father bringing the mother's heart back in a box, like a slave-owning father bringing her heart back in a box. Like, I don't know what to do with that yet. I just needed to say it because, yeah, there is so much in terms of ownership and how much can we own of each other and have of each other in a really deep way. And I feel like within her plays, I'm always struggling with that. Well, who is in control of these bodies? You know, who's in control of my body? I tend to think, because I come and my theater life comes, and theater has given me so much, and I won't go on with that, but just, you know, the fact that I'm here alive is really very much because of theater. And, you know, we can have a drink at the bar and talk about that, but I feel like that those questions of who controls my body, my destiny, those are things that I'm constantly fighting with myself and with the world. And so I feel like in her plays, I have this, or at least in this production for sure, and she talks to Beethoven. I mean, I really have these moments where I'm just kind of lost in that and almost like leave my body because I need to like step outside of it and look at it in another way, you know?
And she does so much explaining of these things. At the very least, in the stage directions, you know what to Google, because there's such this beautiful poetic explaining that you kind of wish you could hear those on stage too. But what I found interesting, because I did read it before doing this, because I was going to be doing this, and I thought I should. And what I felt was I sort of wished I hadn't, because I felt all of those things that when I read it, maybe I didn't understand or that I had to Google. And so what I think is very powerful is that my experience watching it wasn't, oh my goodness, what am I missing? Whereas reading it, I was thinking, oh my goodness, how are they going to put that on stage so I don't miss it? I didn't miss anything. I got more. And I think that's, yeah, I keep ending everything with, I think that's interesting. But I
You know, we should probably open it up to people that I want just because.
This is an honor. No, what it is, but yeah, Yeah, I don't know. Do I want to say anything more? Do you want to talk about when I was confused? I was confused for the whole play, to be honest. I spent the whole time straining to try to understand each stanza. That because I didn't want to miss anything. The text is so dense, and even though she always brings things back, like things always happen. And so it's like I have to let go of that anxiety of like missing the thing, because like the thing is always shattered and the pieces are always reassembled into a different mosaic.
That's true.
And so it's like
Yeah.
and it's like I was sort of like, am I missing something about Germany? And I don't know necessarily the history of like German research for the Holocaust in America. That's not something that I know a ton about, but it's something that I felt like I understood that was the backdrop to this romance. And that was like in the history of this family, and that it was something like that was really like deftly done, and it didn't feel he didn't feel like a villain. In a way, it just sort of felt like it was a fact. Like it felt like she was staring me in the face and saying that this was happening at the same time as all of these other things, and like not separating history out into different arcs.
Yes, exactly, yes. Exactly.
And that's so hard to do, to sort of draw lines between things without being explicit about it or lecturing about it. And so I want to see it again. I want to read it, and I want to try to relax next time.
Let's turn to all you. And before that, let's just, applaud again this amazing. I can't see.
As we turn to questions, ushers have microphones, so they will seek you out.
Why is it that all the panelists are women?
Why is it that you ask?
Why? That's actually a good question. Why not? Why shouldn't it be all women?
I'm not saying it should be. I'm asking why it is.
No, but really, I'm asking why are you asking? For real.
I would also ask something that you addressed, which is why is 95% of the audience older white people?
We could ask that of a lot of theaters in New York. I would love to know. Yeah.
Well, it's also a question of who stays for the talkback.
Well,
So a fair number of black people who may not stay.
We live in a borough that
so I feel like that conversation should also happen in the bar after the thing. Only because I've been having that conversation with theaters and with theater audiences and on panels for the last 2 decades. And the demographic doesn't change, and I think that I articulate it so well. And I do it arming, and I make you laugh, and then I kind of stab you a little. We all go away feeling implicated, but like we, enlightened and all that. I'm so good at that, and nothing changes. And so I feel like that could easily sully the beauty of what happened here. So I would vote, let's not entertain that question, and it's a very good one, and I'll give you my email, because I have strong opinions about that. Now no one's going to ask.
Here in the balcony.
I'd like to ask each one of you, if Adrienne Kennedy was here now, what would you ask her?
I think I'd be like, can I take you to a tea? That's a lot of, that's like a sneaky, like, I've never wished for more wishes, but I don't, it's like I can't imagine asking her just one question.
I would be afraid to speak. Like, when you ask, I feel a certain her. The idea, because I admire her so much and I think she is so brilliant. So I would want to be sitting there watching you two have a conversation. I just listen.
I would want to ask a kind of childish question, which is, which of your plays do you love most and why?
Yours and mine have a tape recorder on.
Yeah, I similarly don't have one question. I would just like to hear her talk about anything she wanted to talk about. Because I feel like there are so many stories in her, and we get a glimpse at a few of them in some of the plays, but yeah, I would just like to hear her.
What would you ask her?
I haven't seen the play yet, I'll see it Tuesday. So I don't know. I would be mostly curious about how she goes about writing. And, you know, the process, the question that you raised earlier would be a very great interest.
She has what is the name of that collection where she talks about her plays, and then she writes a beautiful introduction, and after each one she talks about what she was doing in her life after she did. Is it the reader?
Probably the reader. It's either got to be the reader or in one act.
Go to Amazon. Anyway, you'll see which one it is right away, but there's a beautiful thing in which she talks about, and I'm just struck by how much she talks about the way the images and the colors and the sounds and the flavor and the politic of wherever she was, and she was always somewhere all over the world, influenced the way things came out of her. It's interesting.
I guess I have a question about your visual response at the beginning. After 5 days, the mother leaves, and then there's that not knowing the mother, not knowing the death of the mother. Did you hear me, or should I repeat myself? Okay. I'm wondering about your gut feeling, a response to the beginning where there's death from the man, the death of his mother, and then her fact that after 5 days of living, then the mother leaves. And so there's that disconnect of who was my mother? How did she die? I mean, to me, that's very powerful. And I just wonder, how does that make you feel? I mean, what was this? I see it being very symbolic.
How did it make you feel? And I'm really not diverting, I'm so curious.
There was a disconnect of herself to the mother. So there never would be that relationship, that eye to eye, day to day, crying together or doing whatever together. And it was like severed for whatever reasons. And she kept saying black and blue, and that hits.
And all she had were these other people's
Right.
The grandmothers, the aunts, yeah.
Right, she was ruminating over that, persevering on that, almost to where she was maddened by it.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt like she was completely consumed. Yeah.
So where I guess I felt it kind of in through, and it did send me down a path of trying to understand the place where I was thinking, intellectualizing it in a way that a lot of times I wasn't, was around trying to make connections of the familial relationships.
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, well, who's it going to turn out the mother is in relation to the man. I kept thinking they were going to be related.
I did too. Yeah, the intersectionality between,
There was also just, I loved that moment when he had been, my mother died, and he was talking about that, and you knew they were attracted, and then suddenly, she said, oh, your mother died, and then she said, my mother, and then she went on, and then that got unlocked. And that was very moving to me.
Oh, I had a question. maybe some of you saw last night the PBS documentary on Lorraine Hansberry.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
It'll
another
show many more times again.
very influential black female playwright, of course, who tragically died at the age of 34, almost the opposite, you know, of Adrienne Kennedy.
Actually, the year before Kennedy's first play,
Yeah,
here off-Broadway.
So in seeing that, I saw that Hansberry interwove, you know, her art with political activism. I mean, it's even hard to separate the two. I was wondering about that in connection with Adrienne Kennedy. How has she been a political activist as well as a great playwright? And I was wondering if the panelists have thought about that, the connection between the two, especially in these times.
Well, I think we all think about it as Kennedy would have in all of her times. She was, writing some of her most amazing plays as part of the, rebellious off-Broadway movement was going. Did she participate in the kinds of, panels, fundraisers for political parties that Hansberry did? I don't know.
There's also a way that we, as African American artists, we can't be disconnected from the politic. We don't have the luxury of walking through the world in a way that lets those things be compartmentalized, really. So it's all in there.
But everybody's specific day-by-day actions are different. And that's, her work was also controversial, partly because certain expectations, which much as she admired, she writes about, Hansberry, partly came from Raisin in the Sun. Very, very fixed expectations about what once black plays and playwrights began to just, penetrate ever so slightly. She's being compared to Lorraine Hansberry. Then she's being compared to Leroy Jones, who becomes Barack. Then she's being compared, judged according to what the newest evolving standard, sometimes dictated by unimaginative political positions, should be.
That box you were talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
No, I'm trying to think of an apolitical black writer, and I can't.
I can think of ones that are accused of being apolitical, but I can't think of an
She
apolitical
probably
as well.
was, yeah. Or improper in some way.
We have time for one or two more questions. No? One that we can't see. Yeah.
Okay, I haven't really had enough time to think of this clearly, so it's going to stumble out of my mouth. I wanted to ask you, ladies, who write plays, you direct plays, you create public discussion. And I guess we have like Twitter's something of a national discussion, and the live performance is one of the older ways of having a public conversation. So I'm wondering, for you guys, in your own estimation, where does the line, where does like the nucleus of what you are trying to say, for example, you said that, when you're an African American woman, in this country certainly, politics are intrinsically part of every breath you take, right? You can't separate it out. So where do you start to lose sort of the power of what you're saying? I wonder, where does it become diluted, or does it when you start to have greater resources at your disposal for production? If you make your piece, you guys following what I'm saying, sort of? All right, that's my question. Like, is it possible to create an enormous platform when it comes to live performance that reaches many, 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 many people, or not? when you have more, like, you know what I mean, when you have you know what I mean, like, I guess, the only thing I can imagine, and in fact, I'm thinking of like, what if something that was small and live was then broadcast on a platform like Twitter that would reach, you know, millions of people, and in some ways recreate the intimacy of that small in-person moment. Or, I mean, even like was filmed in the right way. I don't know, I'm just trying to wonder like what it might be when you guys feel the line is drawn, or is it not?
I think about that, or I want to keep talking to you. I think about it a lot, just because I think that a lot of the work that I've been doing has been for spaces where the audience is like 75 people max, often like more like 40. And like if it's possible to have that same, it's like if I go to sit in a Broadway house, I feel no sense of personal responsibility in the audience at all. Like even if sometimes, it's like even if like a performer came out and was like, do you want to come on stage? I feel like the odds of that happening are so slim that there's just no sense of, it's like the lights go out and I disappear.
So it doesn't feel dangerous?
No, never, never. I didn't see Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. Sorry, that was like a cheap shot. But,
So, and do you feel like dangerous is good? I mean, is dangerous what we're reaching for?
not always, but I feel like it's a useful tool, or like that's part of, or this is like the weird like performance studies head of like, the only thing that separates live performance and like a movie or TV show is the possibility of failure. And so like if there's nothing to fall off of, then it doesn't actually feel live in a way, both for the performer and for the audience, I think. And so I don't know if that one tool is replicable, and I don't know if it's interesting. Like, look, the word delusion is interesting too, because it's like there's so much that's happening right now in giant pop culture things that is I find so exciting and inspiring. Like the Wrinkle in Time movie that's coming out. I like loved that book as a kid. It never once occurred to me that that character could be a black girl. Like when I saw the thing on Twitter of the trailer, I cried. That was amazing. And like I think that that's something that's going to be amazing for a lot of girls coming up. And the Black Panther movie, it's not like I have no idea what its politics are, but it seems really fucking cool.
It doesn't even really matter, right? It doesn't even matter.
And so like, and I don't know if those things are diluting a more radical conversation, or if they're just sort of like augmenting it, or widening. I'm not exactly sure either. It's like sometimes I think that it's not about. I'm also rambling, sorry, but sometimes I think, and this might just be because like I want to like be able to support myself as an artist, and so I like want to be able to figure out ways to earn more money, and you need to have more people be able to come and see your work if you're going to earn more money. But I do, I do think that there's something that is weird in live performance that's really different from other forms, that the more professional or good something is, the more expensive and bigger it is. Like if you go to see something that's in a small off-Broadway theater that only seats 20 people, you think that it's immature, or for an emerging artist, or something that or like, and those are the resources that those sorts of artists should have. This is getting into a different conversation maybe, but there is something about slickness and expense being equated with good that I think is bad for our conversations.
Well, I'm gonna, so, I've had a chance to see plays of mine go from storefront to slickness and money. And you don't make any money just because it's in slickness and money, just to say, I don't know why I think you need to know that, but it's interesting too. It's interesting. But I know what you mean about diluted, but it's interesting because I feel that people have responded to their assumption of what it was that I was doing based on the environment in which it was being done. And so I've been in a car with an intern and we're driving to the theater where the play is opening in wherever, and I say, well, what are you going to do? Because that's what you're supposed to do when you're being driven. What are you going to do? And they often start talking about, well, I'm doing political theater, and I'm going to do all these things, and they're saying all of these things that I think I'm doing, that I'm trying to do, and then they say, well, but I don't want to do it on Broadway. What is it? What is it that makes it not? And in truth, a play is better always in a 75-seat theater than it's going to be in an 1,100-seat theater. But there were 1,100 Black people sitting in that theater laughing and crying and enjoying my work, and that feels like, oh, well, people are seeing it because it's in this space. And I think it's a really interesting conundrum. I don't feel like I have less of an imperative to try to say something important, but again, never does anything I write start off in somewhere big. I write it, and then I develop it, or if I'm lucky, it gets produced. And it always kind of goes like this, if it does. So.
Well, I want to say one thing to one of the first things you said. So I'm Canadian and Barbadian, so I feel like that that heritage has meant that a lot of the first theater that I saw, or theater with like a big TH, right, like everything, was actually in the streets with like thousands of people. Like Carnival, we call it crop over, is like in the streets, and like everybody's out there, right? And so I don't worry about I worry about getting resources. Always need more resources. We'd always like to have more. But I don't worry about the integrity of the work because I'm always me. And I come to the table as me. And people may like that, people may not like that. Some days they like it more than other days, right? But I'm always me, and I always come with my own set of values and morals and ideas about how I see the world and what I think the truth is. And I think that whatever I put on stage is the truth as I see it. And now, it's interesting when an audience, as the audiences grow with certain pieces, right, and the audiences mix, and so it's no longer, a group of people who know who I am or know my work or seen my last pieces. I'm being more and more thrown into situations where, people have not seen the work before. But I think that's exciting. That's an exciting thing to bring the truth, my truth, to new conversations.
Last question.
Yes, you do.
I was wondering, when you read it, you're struck by it.
Can you bring the microphone close to your mouth? Yeah.
You have an emotional connect with this play. Is when you see it staged, does that sort of bring a different kind of connection? I know when I read a book that I just love, I never want to see that somebody else is reading it. I like my own. And so I was wondering about that. I had read someplace that Adrienne Kennedy's work is more studied than before. And the sort of richness that comes from the reading of it than from seeing somebody else's concept of how this should be performed and what the play means. And I was wondering that you wanted to make a comment about that, since I've talked too long.
You have not talked too long. But I always like to see something staged because I like to see the conversation of it, or like the conversation that the director is having with the play and that the designer is going to have with the play, and it's something where I have that same feeling with novels often, where it's like I don't want to see the movie of something that I've loved very much, but if I can imagine the movie being made by a different novelist that I really loved, or like a director that I really admired, and what that person's interpretation of the thing that I love is, and that it might like illuminate some part of it that I hadn't previously connected to. The opportunity for that to me is amazing, or that's why I love theater.
As someone who gets to stage things, I'm really always excited by the process of figuring out, like, okay, how do we put this on stage? But I do say, when I go to see something, like, I didn't read this play before I came because I immediately start directing it in my head. So it was important to just come and have the experience, you know, to not come in with a whole set of, well, I would have done, right? Just to have an experience kind of wash over me. You know, that's really something I've been, you know, training myself to do for, I don't know, like 20, 30 years, like how to just let an experience or let something someone says wash over me and not be ready to fix it, like I'm a fixer-upper, you know? And I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think writing is an incredible talent, like to be able to put your thoughts and feelings on paper and let that in black and white be tangible and felt, and you know, that's an incredible talent. But I also get excited by seeing companies gather around a set of material and like figure it out like a puzzle, you know? What is there? Or like dinner, right? Like what you bring to the table, so we're gonna cook together. So you bring a little onion, he brings a little spice, they bring a little meat, somebody brings some vegetable, you know, like we put it together and we see what we make. And I find that exciting, and I think it's something that is, how to say, like, I feel like that's missing in the world right now. Like people getting together and doing things together and creating a new thing together. And maybe we're in that process right now with the Women's March and this kind of revolution that's rumbling under like the crap that's happening in Washington. Like I feel like people are doing that. People are like holding on to each other, trying to figure out how to like get through the next day or the next week or the next month together. And I think that for me, theater is a little microcosm of like how like I try to live in the world, you know? So I find it exciting.